Hard times and 5 kids.
My mom's life sometimes was from the book of Job, but she handled it like Psalm 100.
Yeah, I think it would be called Through It All, and that I've learned to trust in Jesus. She lives her faith through all of the things that she's experienced in her life, from losing her mother and her baby brother at a young age, then losing grandchildren, my father's early death, her sister, her brother, her father. She's the lone survivor in her family. And she never doubts that God is by her side to see her through. But she doesn't expect an easy row, and she just trusts him.
Keeping the faith, baby. Raising 5 kids. And
Faith is really important.
yes.
Verdas Victory Garden.
One book idea, The Fast and the Verda. Second idea is Lifting Gravity with Grace.
First of all, Grandma would never write anything about herself, so someone else would have to write her memoirs. And in that case, I think the title would be Verda, the woman who saw the good in everyone. And honestly, anyone that has ever met her could write that.
I was born over by Rippey in a farmhouse, and the doctor came out and delivered me there. And the story they tell, I guess Mom and Dad had just, back then when you rented a farmhouse, the first thing you did was move in and put up fresh wallpaper. And anyway, it was one of those really cold days, and Dad got the stove so fired up that it popped some of the wallpaper off of the ceiling. Back then, your wallpaper paste was just you boiled flour and water. You didn't have the glue in it. My grandma, Kenny, was there also, and then they say that the house was still pretty cold, but she wrapped me in a blankie and sat by the oven door. She opened the oven door down on the cook stove and got me warmed up. The folks had only rented the Rippey house where I was born in, and then the next year they moved to Cooper, which is where Eloise, and that's where I grew, was young and went to school at Cooper. But it was just a matter of about 3 miles from the Rippey district to the Cooper district. So it was a little bigger farm that he had rented. And I remember the year that we still lived at Cooper, and I didn't get to go to school for 6 weeks because that was back in the snowstorm of 35 or 36? It was a 36 that we were no more, and yet, of course, back then they didn't have the equipment to clean the roads like they do now, and the farmers got together and they would scoop by hand ahead of the snow plow because it didn't have enough strength to plow. And then that night, up would come the wind, fill it all in. I mean, and Cooper was about 1.5 miles from our place. And so one of my favorite birthday presents was when my dad walked to Cooper and came home with a number 2.5 can of purple plums, and it was a cardboard tea. Back then, they received the tea in a bulk box, and I suppose it was 5 or 10 pounds, and probably just only about 3 to 5 pounds. But anyway, the lady at the store had emptied, because you bought your tea, loose leaf tea, by the pound or the ounce or whatever you were purchased it. And so she had this, and I remember it was kind of had the paper on the outside was a basket weave. I used it for my doll clothes for years. 1937, and we moved. Then Dad he'd bought that farm over here by Luther, and that was when the federal land bank came back after the farm crisis had crashed and people had lost their farms. He happened to be a young farmer getting started, be 5, why he bought that. And at that time, you didn't put the woman's name on it. So my mother's name wasn't on the. It was just in George Kenny, and but then things changed, as the years went on. Women could own property, and then of course Brother John was born. We moved in March, of course, and then that July 4th, Brother John was born. Oh, and yes, I'll have to tell you. Of course, I'd had my favorite teacher at Cooper, and then all the kids knew me and everything, but I moved over here to Luther, and that first week or two was pretty lonesome because nobody knew me, and Eloise leave it to the baby sister. Of course, she was in kindergarten, or was she in first grade? No, back then, by then, I did not go to kindergarten or primary. I started just right into first grade, but then she was in the kindergarten. And so we had seen one another out on the playground, and she said, the kids didn't like you either. She said it at the supper table. And I can remember my dad just laugh, but he didn't want to really laugh.
That makes me think of Cora. Why she would have said that.
Yeah, right. Yep. That's the thing. My heart goes out to Alana. It's very hard to be the oldest. You're supposed to set a good example, but in the meantime, you're just so intense, trying to keep them straight. Oh dear. There were several times that Eloise would say, now get this. She would argue with me that when the wind was blowing, that the trees made the wind. And I said, no. I knew. I remember that one. Never did straighten her out on that one, I don't think. Basically, what I remember about my childhood was because I followed my dad. Well, I think he took me with him to keep mom from worrying about me or something, but I followed along, and we built fence, and because back then you built quite a bit of fence and fenced off the 80 acres, where you'd have the plot that was the pasture, and then you had your oats field and you had your cornfield. We didn't have beans at that time. And so the hay ground, well, first of all it was oats, and then it went to hay. And so then you fenced these so the cows, milk cows, and the horses could be. So I really, really remember carrying the bucket, it was a 5-gallon, the little gallon pail of steeples, to follow Dad up and down that lane when he was building that fence. Then I also can remember slopping the hogs, because we had a barrel, and in there you had the water and then the ground corn and oats, and you stirred that, and then it kind of fermented overnight, and then when you took the bucket and slopped it up, they just loved that. Man, they come squealing. They loved their slop. When I was a child, we just had the milk cows, and there was usually then, because we weren't into dairy very big, we just had like 3 or 4 milk cows, and they would come fresh then, and you would have, and that was when you milk. Of course, you used the milk to make the slop for the pigs, the skim milk. You separated the cream, and you sold the cream to the milk. We had the truck came, and I remember the milkman, he picked up our cream then, and his name was Johnny Bennett, because I always went out. Eloise and I always had to go out. We kept the cream in the tank to keep it cold, keep the milk or the cream from being sour, and and then we'd have to go out there where he came with a big truck, and he always said we were the two of the cutest blondes because our heads were tow-headed, all bleached out. And then mostly I remember about carrying water because that was the big thing. You pumped the water and you carried it to the house. And, I guess that was, and then getting and then hurry home from school, change into my outfits because you usually had 2 or 3 outfits and then you were school clothes. You took those off, put on your work clothes, got out to get 2 buckets of coal and a basket of cobs, and if there was a little wood, you got that also, but usually there wasn't. And then carried some water on the side of the cook stove was this, what we called, it was a warming place, and so your water would be warm because you had to get those chores done because Jack Armstrong, the All American Boy, was on the radio, and you wanted to hurry back in to hear his episode. My uncles. Now there's a trial. My Winger uncles. Any orneriness I have in me is from them because when Grandpa Winger remarried, why, can you imagine a house full of 6 boys, how ornery they can be? And so in the summertime, why, Mom and Dad would have them, a couple of them every summer, come and stay, and they could help Dad with the chores. And but of course, they teased me because Uncle, it was Eldon was a rascal, but then it was Glenn that was a rascal too, and he rode my tricycle. I can still remember him getting on my tricycle and riding it on. His knees were up over the handle, and I'm standing there crying. And of course, then he calls me a ball baby. So that was my life. But then of course we were coming up out of the Depression, and so then the boys worked for the 3 C's, and that was what they had for the young people, right? The WPA for the men, for adult men, and so then, and of course, naturally, they stayed in these camps when they were away, and they brought home bed bugs, and I can remember my mother being so upset because she had to boil the sheets and the pillows that they brought home to kill the bed bugs. Yeah. Well, she knew it had to be done, and she was just had to get rid of those bugs because she didn't want bugs around her children.
Wrote me a letter one time saying that during the war that you had to pick corn by hand because they wouldn't let you buy any rubber.
That's right, for tires. Mm-hmm.
What other restrictions were there that you couldn't get during the war?
Well, we had rations, so gas rations, and you saved your coupons and then so many stamps you could buy gas. You were allotted, and because farmers were allotted a little more, but it still wasn't. And, well, that was the excuse why I didn't get to go to some basketball games. And then, of course, we were rationed for food and sugar, because they used the sugar to make explosives. And what else? Well, meat rationing didn't affect us too much because we had our hog, although I'm not fond of bacon to this day because we cured our own meat, and of course come summer, without refrigeration but just maybe some ice or something once in a while, then because the bacon was sugar cured, and of course we did have some meat canned, but she saved that for the men that you had to feed until the chickens. Once the chickens were big enough to dress, why then you had meat for your hired men. But otherwise, why? So some days it'd be 2 slices of bacon. And the bacon wasn't as nice as it is to this day because there was more lard, more fat on it. So, and now my sister Eloise, she even tried making bacon gravy. And so we always teased her about that. She used drippings to make gravy, which it worked because there was enough fat in the skillet to brown some little flour and add some milk. You got a bacon gravy. And let's see. So rationing, that was the thing that we did for the war effort. And let's see. But we were more fortunate than people who were in the cities because we did have, usually every farmstead had an old apple tree, so you had your fruit, and then you had garden space. We raised hemp. My dad planted, maybe he did get a supplement for planting. I think we had 3 or 5 acres of hemp. But then, for years after, my dad, because then there was never any market after that, needing it for the war effort, and it just spread, and we had to pull it out of the corn because it would, and out of the oats fields. You always wanted to get into your oats field, and you didn't want hemp in amongst your shocks of oats. And you couldn't get out of the county because you might lose your stamps for your tires. And we didn't. Now some people didn't get to go, or got to go to Boone, come into Boone from down by Luther on Saturday night, because that's where quite a few farmers did, but we had to save our gas because Sunday morning we had to come clear to Boone to Trinity to church. So the rest of the kids could just go to Luther to the Methodist church, but so I didn't get to go and run around on the streets on Saturday night in Boone. It was through high school. He went to Napier and I went to Luther. And then, we could at least play basketball against Napier kids because that was in Boone County. And so then Charles Bassett and Ruby, my good friend Ruby Brown, Ruby and I had been chums ever since, all through high school or through our school, and so I guess we were. They started. Chucky had started dating Ruby, and then Junior Floyd had asked if he could get a blind date with Verda. He saw me out there on the basketball floor, so I played. My 6 foot, I was a 6 foot guard. And Ruby was a little short forward, that was half court. So I always you'd only take one dribble, could I make my long legs and that ball go a long ways. I'd get up to the line, pass it over the line to Ruby so she could go shoot. I was an old maid. I was 20.
That's old.
That was old. All my girlfriends were married at 18. Here I was, 20. Anyway, that was, the Lord has taken care of me all my life, even though I never admitted it. But anyway, what I had planned before my mother passed away, shortly after the war started, the government offered this. Well, I'm still, of course, a junior in high school, and they came out with this program that if you went and they would freely educate you to be a nurse, and then you did have to work for the Army for 2 years, but then you had your nursing degree. So, okay, Ruth Henderson and Margaret Burke and we were going to go to Chicago and so the 2 girls went, and that was when Mom passed away, and so I stayed at home. That's probably a good thing I stayed in Iowa. So that was my career change. But basically, then got married and got to have a family. After I'd lost Keith, that was my one desire, was to. But then, of course, I always tell the story about, how babies will sometimes, like, you don't even know if they're breathing. Of course, I always had the basket right there by the bed and had my hand in the basket with him. But if he was like he wasn't breathing, I'd snatch him up, shake the baby, sound asleep, but I'd wake him up just to see for sure if he was breathing. By the time I had more children, I got over it, I think. They might tell you a tale later about being snatched out of bed to see if they were breathing. Poor Bob, the oldest one, lots of times gets most of, having been the oldest child also. He's the most outspoken, I guess you would say. Although Pam and Cheryl both are very definite, have their own mannerisms. And let me see. I guess the Bill and Tim had to learn to be diplomatic to get along, and so that's why when they were in their jobs, why it's a good thing that they were. Although I guess it's because the older children, they had to be in charge. I mean, I was always sending them to do this or do that. Go check on where Tim was. He could be in the tank, the water tank, the cattle water tank. He could be halfway up the windmill. He could be on the back of the sofa. Bill was a little quieter. He could sit and play in the sand. And then Tim was willing to plow in the yard, in the garden. And so I think the kids, I was glad that we were able to be out where there was a yard for them, because they did a lot of things. They entertained themselves that way. Had ball games and played games, and when we would go to our friends in the evenings or something, why then they'd Old Gray Wooly and Pum Pum Pull Away and Annie Over and all of the yard games that you can do. I guess World War II affected my life the most. And I've gone from, of course, much change in farming, and even in occupations for men and women, because manufacturing came in when I was real young. I mean, most everybody was in the farming or in some sort of supplying your own food and then it went into, there were factory jobs, and women were worked in the workplace, or of course then the farm wife was still the busiest because she didn't put in just 8 hours. She was there for her family and her husband's occupation. So I've seen a lot of things. As Martin would say, we've had the best of times, because our life was one when we were young there wasn't much to be had, and now there's probably too much to be had. Just try to be respectful of other people's, and other people have ideas that I sometimes don't agree with, but I've tried to be respectful, but of course I'm not always. And then I guess just to be thankful and enjoy life, right? I think that's what I've always been able to do, and thankful I've been able to be as blessed and as fortunate and as happy as I've been, because other people have had a lot of sadness in their life. I think the main thing is that we've always known that God was there. We know there's God, and that just kind of answers the whole thing. Just makes life enjoyable. And of course, then there's grandchildren. They were special, and then great grandchildren. I mean, they're super. And that's my big blessing. That sometimes I say, "Oh, poor Junior," because he liked kids, and he would have appreciated these little great grandbabies too.
Well, we were herding hogs, and a hog Mom was going 120 mile an hour, and the hog decided it wanted to go the other way, and it went right between her legs, and she was riding the hog backwards like a rodeo.
She always felt like she had to do her part. And I think it was the last load of hay came in, and the guys were getting tired. And she just wanted to make an example that she could do it too. She could pick it up, and she could load the bale of hay. Well, anyway, long story short, she ends up grabbing and trying to horse this 100-pound bale of hay into the elevator. It lands in the elevator. She's on top of the bale. She's riding up towards the hay. And of course, Dad, being a little bit ornery, let her ride up halfway up the elevator before he turned the PTO off.
I remember we went over to help Pam move. She was at Iowa City, and she had that white station wagon, or white car, whatever it was. And I think it was Joanne Tripp and maybe someone else we went to. And the hood kept coming up, so you had to pull over and slam it down, and we'd go again.
I've seen Grandma do lots of spastic things.
Cookies! Evan.
Anything with mashed potatoes and gravy.
Pickled beets. And homemade jellies and jams.
Apple crisp.
Mashed potatoes.
The pies. The lemon meringue, the mincemeat, the rhubarb, the strawberry, etc. They're all very, very good.
Fried chicken. Although that poor chicken barely stretched around the table. There was never any leftovers in our house. I don't ever remember having leftovers till after I got married.
Oh, that's an easy one. I love the ham balls.
Orange cookies, which I don't get as often since Tim's gluten-free, and I'm kind of sad about that. So hint on that, just in case.
Make a full meal out of leftovers. She just knew how to do it and feed us all.
I also enjoyed eating Gigi casserole. I don't actually know the name of it. I've just always called it that. But it's really good.
Her chicken is fabulous. Really anything she bakes. Anytime you're over at her house, she makes sure that you go home with a full belly and that you take something of hers that she no longer has a use for.
Grandma makes these, now she calls them tuna boats, and you get a hot dog bun, you put some tuna in it. Sometimes there's not even enough for everyone.
I've been talking about my boyfriend and her friends about how good of a cook Grandma was, and we got there and she had tried something new. Now, Grandma usually served roasted potatoes and carrots or ham or something like that. And we got there that day and she was all excited because she had found this recipe in a magazine to make tuna boats out of hot dog buns.
Is the pies that Grandma makes, that she'll make lemon meringue pie, which is pretty good. There's mincemeat pies that are really good. There's a sour cream raisin pie that's pretty.
Probably the chicken that she bakes in the oven, and about all the cookies that she sends us home with every time we go to her house.
Well, my all-time favorite is the monster cookies, and I remember looking forward to Christmas every year. She'd send us a package, and with the oatmeal cylinders, those would be full of Monster cookies. And I remember just opening up that box and getting into those, and then getting one or two before Dad ended up eating the rest.
Well, I never got in trouble, so that's
Of course not.
Of course not. I believe I might have went to a party when I was younger, and I made it home, and then in the middle of the night I got sick and I ran into the wall, and the next morning I found myself out cleaning a hog house, still not feeling very well, but with a scoop shovel.
With the scoop
Sure that she was firm, and I had older brothers and sisters that if she really didn't have to, because my siblings a lot of times would take the discipline in their own hands. And
Oh, I remember one time I'd taken Barb down there, and I backed up too fast with the car and I about spun it in the ditch. I remember Mom kind of came unglued at me. I don't know if there's any punishment, but she told me that I shouldn't be driving that way with Barb in the car.
I have to agree.
Probably a little high strung, like she is. Get wound up pretty easy, and always look for the best in people. So it's maybe to a fault sometimes, but
He's a warrior, Mark, like Grandma is, but he's got a big heart.
Be in conversation, and somehow a word will trigger off a song, and she just starts singing it.
Her pure, raw grit and determination for being a positive and upbeat person.
It's that our belief in God is worth it, and it's positive because there were many times that Larry and Cheryl needed it very badly, especially when it came to Erica, when it came to Kara, and that was very enlightening. She took care of us, helping to direct us.
Just how much she loves people. Always ready to welcome someone into her home. And for some reason, even now when she's 90 and lives by herself, if you walk into her house, there's always food. Always. Prepared and cookies ready, and I don't know how she does that. I love how people are always welcome for however long, and there's always tea to drink and a good conversation, and she always just had time. So I want to exemplify that, to have time for people and love them, and I just cherish that I still get handwritten notes. Also I would say I hope to just love Jesus and want to serve him and be so humble. I really admire that she's always putting other people before self, and I admire her faith. I really hope that someday I can be as outgoing as she is at 90 years old, and as sharp as she is, because frankly, I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning.
She's a good person, and I think that's why a lot of people like her.
You know, adjusting to life out in the country, and one of the things I asked Verda how to do was to freeze corn and learn how to make cinnamon rolls. And freezing corn I still do quite regularly, and the cinnamon rolls not so much, because they seem to be a little bit more time intensive, but spent a lot of hours learning how to do that with Verda. Martin poked his head in every so often, but it was just us for pretty much the whole day.
Walker, when he proposed to me, gave me roses that gave 12 reasons why he wanted to marry me, and one of them was that I served people humbly. And I took that to Grandma and I gave that to her because I think that that's something that I admire in her and would like to exemplify better in my life, and that I try to do in my daily life.
So thankful that I am 38 years old and I still have my grandma. And I feel that that's probably due in large part that she's told the good Lord that she's not ready to go. And she probably is stubborn enough to think that she can tell God when her time is. I love the fact that my kids are teenagers and growing up with their great-grandma, and to know her and have such a special relationship with her.
So I am most grateful for Martin, because he gave my grandma back to me, because
she was downtrodden after Grandpa died, and her dad was in bad health. And I respect her very much for taking care of him when things started going south on his health.
I always thought it was important the way she always put us kids and everybody else first. She always had a servant spirit, and she always was taking care of everybody. Anybody that needed something done, she was there to take care of them. If somebody died, she was one of the first ones there to see them and take them a hot dish. And if somebody had a new baby, she wanted to be one of the first ones to go see the new baby. And she just was always, other people were really always important to her.
Grandma to me is one of the strongest, most gracious, and yet has a little bit of spastic built in just to keep her grounded. I think that is the only trait that truly passed down to me 100%, and I could definitely use additional grace and strength.
She's just not a little old lady at all. I love that she still drives herself, even though I feel like my lead foot was inherited directly from her. I love how spastic she is. Again, I think I might have that. And I hope that someday when I grow up, I am like somewhere close to the grandma that she is.
I think Verda is probably the person I know of best who has the missionary spirit, and she shows it and uses it all the time. She's used it her whole life. And I'm just very impressed with her faith and how she shows it in her missionary attitude to everyone.
The ones that I hope to exemplify would be that I'm hardworking, determined, always care about others.
I think my mom is a wonderful friend to her friends, and I would like to be a better friend to my friends. She's always very thoughtful with phone calls, cards, and she even entertains people in her home often.
She's taught me how to be a mother-in-law. She is a very good mother-in-law.
She always had care for others. It was never her first, it was always others first.
Just the way that she's so selfless, and she helps anybody and everybody, and it doesn't matter whether they would do the same for her or not. She just jumps in and does it.
Incredible combination of a kind, patient person, and she's also determined, stubborn, and she wants to accomplish something new every day. And I just think that's amazing, her hardworking ethic and her grit and determination.
Well, I'd like to have more of a spirit like she has, to taking care of everybody and being kind to everybody. And sometimes I don't quite come across that way.
I think in all the time that I've known her, I've never heard her say an unkind word about anybody. And if she did, she stopped herself before she said something. And that I wished I could do that. But she's just sweet. She was always, like Pam had mentioned, she was always doing something for somebody else, never talked bad about them, and she's just great that way.
Still sort of silly that our grandmother can be, and I also I think it's important to kind of be able to keep that lightheartedness. I think that's so great, and also I think very important is how kind Grandma is. Her kindness to other people and caring and thinking about other people is just it's really something to see, and it's something that I can hope to learn from and be like.
My dragon jammy, a sleep sack thing that has monkey prints on it. Pillow. My pillow, my favorite pillowcase. I love it.
Probably one of the quilts that she's made me.
Dragon jammies.
Dragon jammies. What else?
My blankie.
And what else?
My pillowcase.
One thing that I really used a lot was a cape when I was pregnant because it worked good for the winter.
Two favorites. There are a lot of things she made me, but my two favorites are a rainbow dress that when Walker first saw this picture of me, oh
It's
yeah,
in here. I'll find it.
okay. When Walker first saw this picture of me, it's his favorite picture, and it's because of the dress, clearly. And then my second favorite thing that Grandma made is actually a Grandma square quilt that she gave to me when Eloise was born. She wrapped it up and said, you know, I made this for a special little girl 24 years ago for her baby shower. But then when they opened all her gifts, there were so many blankets, so I just folded it back up and I kept it. And it was for me when I was a baby, and she gave it to me with Eloise, and I love it, and it's so sweet. And then this is my rainbow dress. At least I didn't take it to 4-H, because we all know that I did that with a couple things Grandma made.
One of my favorite things she's made, or one of the things that gets definitely daily use from my college days on, I'm not going to say how long ago that was, but this is my sunflower apron that matched my first apartment.
It's a great question because there's been so many things, so many it's Christmas and then everybody has a similar sized box and you all open them at the same time. I probably can't list them all. I do have a couple though with me. I've got this apron from a while ago. It's great, beautiful, we use it. Thank you for this apron. And also, and this is, I didn't expect this one, but this thing, which is it's a towel and it's got rice inside of it, and what you can do is you can put it in the microwave and then you put it around your neck and it's so warm, it stays warm, it's very nice. It's great to pull out. It's a great conversation piece. Really fantastic item that I got. It probably has a name, but I couldn't tell you what it is, but that's another great grandma gift.
That were my Annie dress when I was probably preschool age. She made us all Raggedy Ann dolls. She made us all Care Bears. She made us all Amish dolls. We just had so many special things that Grandma made. But I think the one that's my favorite, because I did use it like every day, was when I was getting ready to go to college, was when Grandma made us all those lap quilts that folded down into like throw pillow size.
Well, we know that Grandma doesn't have favorites. Well, she can't physically like say them verbally out loud, but obviously I'm her favorite because of the things that Grandma has made me over the years. These are a few of the items that Grandma has made me. Pound Puppy and my Care Bear. And this is the first bear that I made with Grandma. It was a 4-H project. I took it to the fair and I believe I got a purple, maybe a blue, but we're all old enough now. We're going to go with purple.
And with Abby joined us for the Herschel family reunions, and Verda always made sure that Abby was just like one of the grandkids. If she had made something special for the grandkids, Abby had one too. So that was really delightful to have her be so welcoming to my family when they came to visit.
A blanket for a crib for the babies, a pillowcase doll.
Favorite thing is the blanket that she sent us, or that she sent me, and I received in 1999. And we still keep it on our couch, and Sarah and I we usually have a race when we're gonna have a movie.
One of my favorites was a velvet Christmas dress that she made me when I was little that was burgundy and it had like little lace flowers. My other favorite thing that she ever made was for my wedding. All the bridesmaids had fur muffs that they put their hands in instead of flowers, and she made those for all the bridesmaids, so that was really special.
I don't know, that's a tie. She made me a quilt, and I love quilts. The other thing that I really use is the little rice thing. I don't know what you call it, the rice thingamajigger.
Well, first of all, you can wear it like this, or if you're really going to be where it's all windy, you tie it back like this. And then, of course, you can use it like this. Now, this is just strictly that we women can use. But then, worst comes to worst, you can make a diaper out of it for somebody needs a change. And just comes right around like that and just perfect little diaper. And then if you have the mumps, which of course people don't have the mumps anymore, they always works to help support that jaw that's sore.
I remember seeing a picture of you with it like this.
So anyway, the tea towel is the housewife's answer to many questions, and it'll make a sling for a sprained or broken arm. All you have to do is just tie it up like that, and away you go.
So when you paint, you don't get paint in your hair. You tie it back behind.
I don't know, I've never had one.
So in times where I don't have a bib for Eloise or for myself, I make sure to wear it as a bib. And Eloise kind of loves it. And she kind of gets sad when she spills on it because it has fantastic designs.
Putting this directly on the skin is a little too cold. But if you take the tea towel and you wrap your frozen veggie, it's just the perfect barrier between, and it's a nice ice pack.
I like to, really cover my neck all with Vicks Vapor Rub. And then you have to get the tea towel, just right, so it fits just right around it. And then you can't tie it because it's not comfortable, and I didn't grab a pin. But you have to do it like this and be really careful where you put your pin. So when you sleep at night, safety pin.
Oh.
So when you sleep at night, you don't get poked in the middle of the night wondering what happened. But it really does solve a sore throat, doesn't it, honey?
It does.
It does.
Used to have onions inside of it when we were kids.
Yeah, I didn't do onions. I just do the Vicks.
You weren't real popular in those days.
The best use for a tea towel may amaze you. I don't know if you've seen this one yet, but it's innovative. It's a little cape, and if she starts having accidents, or even a blindfold.
So my favorite use of a tea towel that I learned from Grandma is highly useful as the mother of 4 children. So when in doubt, my model's going to walk in here now. The tea towel can serve as a lovely sling when you're in a pinch with a sprained or strained wrist, possibly if you're this child, a broken collarbone, whatever you might need a sling for. So thank you, Grandma, for teaching us how to make a tea towel, an ordinary kitchen item, into an emergency medical device.
I remember one particular time I was laying on the floor after taking a bath at Grandma and Grandpa's house, and she came up with a tea towel and wrapped it around my wet hair because I was going to catch a cold.
One of the many uses you can have for a tea towel. And this is when you're going to knock down the cobwebs off of your ceiling. And so you tie this around your hair so you don't get the cobwebs knocked into your hair. Also, you have to put a tea towel around the broom that you're using to knock down the cobweb.
Having or catching a cold, I think she'd have it around her neck with something in there to make her all better. That was her way of taking care of the cold out inside the house.
So I was feeling a little left out on the whole tea towel thing because I didn't grow up with y'all, but I do have a tea towel story. It was when we were living in Texas and I got some weird thing, like my neck was swollen and something was wrong with my ear. I don't know, Mom called Grandma. They thought I had the mumps. They diagnosed me. It was amazing. Anyways, I don't really think I did because I'm pretty sure we got vaccines for that.
Why do you think they call it?
But anyways,
call it WebMD. It's
not MomMD.
Mom doctors. Mom doctors. That's what
so
we are.
I got a tea towel sent to me with a diagram on how I was supposed to wrap it up. I don't really remember, so I can't demonstrate that with you. But anyways, that was the only tea towel story memory that I have.
Wait until you've been drying dishes for a while so it gets really moist, because then it's got heft to it and you can snap. You get to snap.
Straight the best use of a tea towel.
This is the best use of a tea towel? The bib.
Oh, let's pray for her. Lord bless her.
I thought it was more like, that is the luckiest girl in the whole wide world.
Well, relief comes to mind. I was still living at home, and yeah.
I'm the one that had to call her, and she was screaming through the phone. And she was just kept saying, "You're going to save him. You're going to save him." But I think we saved each other.
Well, she was just happy as a lark. She's always like Barb.
Starting, we had moved back to rural Boone County. We lived about 2 miles away, and so after school we'd get off the bus, we'd walk down to Grandma's house, the old farm, and she'd sneak us marshmallows out of the cabinet, and sometimes she'd get a hard marshmallow, and sometimes she'd have brand new soft marshmallows, but I remember her sneaking us marshmallows, which was always a lot of fun. And
I remember when she would come down to Kansas and we'd play basketball, she'd always challenge us to a game of horse.
Well, who'd win?
She would.
Her coming and staying at her house when Mom and Dad went to New Orleans.
Always going to her house and playing cards with her, and I always thought it was funny that we can never leave her house without taking something out of her garden or something that she bakes.
How she was very accepting of my nieces when they came to visit us. When Emily came, we had lunch with Verda and Martin and learned how to play dominoes. And Emily enjoyed that so much that we actually bought her a container of dominoes for one of her birthday gifts.
I remember when I was down in New Mexico and she was too. I was about 4 and we went on a walk. Me, Madison, and her got lost, and we had to walk over to the clubhouse to call our grandparents to pick us up.
One evening I heard a noise and wasn't sure really what it was, but then I saw a bat flying around and I didn't know what to do, so I'm quite certain it was an after midnight phone call to Verda, because obviously I'm not going to call my mom. She doesn't live close enough. And so I called Verda, and she kind of talked me down and gave me some things to do.
We got invited to play Mexican Chain with all of Gigi's friends, and then afterwards we...
Well, wait a minute. Did you get to win? Did they let you win at this game?
No.
What? You mean those little old ladies don't let grandchildren win, great-grandchildren win?
I'm Grandma's 3rd grandchild, but I'm definitely her favorite. Probably at least cause her the most gray hair. One of my earliest memories is running my hand through the wringer washer in her basement and having her freak out and reach up and pull the cord down, and then we had to go back out. But going to town and getting x-rays, and then Justin got a lollipop too. It really wasn't fair, the whole thing. But
I just remember piling us kids in the car and either racing to town or racing to church, because she was always running 5 minutes late. And somehow or another, she'd always get there about on time.
I remember when she came down to Kansas City and walked with us for the JDRF fundraiser.
Just the way that she was always running around and going 100 mile an hour. And it's kind of like, she's going to hurt herself.
Tough to keep.
Whenever we took a bath at her house, she had a big closet tub, one of those really old style ones with the black outside and the porcelain white inside. But you could only have an inch of water in the tub for your bath. And so I remember we were getting fairly grown up, like probably 7, 8, 9, and we were still bathing in an inch of water, and always thinking that was really funny.
When we'd go to great grandma's house in Martin and we'd go pick berries in their backyard, she would always tell me not to pick up the deer poop because they were not berries.
Gigi and Martin just moved into their apartments, and I remember we were baking cookies, and it was the first time I got to use a rolling pin. And I was really excited.
Remember lots of grandchild sleepovers at her house, and sleeping in the living room, get a Dixie cup of pop, fun times right there. I I remember sewing lots of cool things with her growing up because my own mom didn't have patience to sew with me, but my grandma did. And then making monster cookies and
My dimple.
Can you show me that dimple?
Always gardening.
Her dicky.
Probably her sending me letters. I was always amazed at the fact that she could remember so much from her life.
I remember when we lived in Jordan up across the railroad tracks, and I suppose I was about 3 years old, and I got in trouble for going down towards the elevator, going across the Chicago Northwestern tracks. And that's just kind of a one instance deal, but I kind of remember being pretty upset about it.
Every February, she and Martin would drive up to Texas to spend my birthday with me, which is really special. I also remember making an American Girl doll quilt with her, which I really enjoyed because I loved my American Girl dolls. And then I also remember baking with her when she came up to visit us in Kansas. We'd always make red hot applesauce, elephant ears, ham balls, which I forced my family members into getting the recipe and trying to recreate, and it was never the same.
Walking really fast down the street, and we were always just trying to keep up, and we had to run to keep up with her.
Favorite memories would have to be any time around the breakfast table. I feel like that was always where we had really good conversations between her, Martin, and I remember always having oatmeal.
Playing basketball in the front driveway, and she'd always want to play horse, and I would always try to beat her by taking the shots from behind the basket, but she would always get me with those crazy hook shots that she had.
We were having school pictures, and my bangs were too long. And so she decided she'd seen read in a magazine or seen somewhere that if you put a piece of Scotch tape across your bangs and then you could just trim them, that they would come out nice and even. And I had very white blonde hair at the time, and so she tried that. And when she cut the bangs, they weren't quite straight, so she tried again, and they still weren't quite straight. And unfortunately, I have a little colic at the top of my bangs, and by the time she quit cutting, it had hit the colic, my bangs were sticking straight out.
The funniest memories that I can remember of Grandma was I had a friend over to her house, and we were playing hopscotch with rocks in the road. And so we were hopping, and it was Grandma's turn, and she fell over the rock, tripped on her face, got up, and bolted down to the bridge. And my friend just looked at me and was like, "Your grandma can run?" I think that was one of the first moments where I was like, yes, my grandma can run. And it was a very funny moment.
That Verda was petrified to go up into those windy roads and those tall mountains. I would tease her and just drive with one hand and look back and ask her a question, and she'd be chatting along before I'd do that, and then when I looked back, she just clammed up. She wouldn't say anything. And so it was fun, and it was
fun to tease her.
It was just fun to tease her.
Pam, one special time was Ben was about 6 months old, and he was ready to start eating solid foods, and she was able to feed him his first bite of solid food.
Aww.
So it was very special.
Grandma had a big, huge tree out in her front yard out at the farm, and she used to bring out a big stack of sheets and clothespins, and even I feel like maybe a playpen. Maybe you were in the playpen. I don't remember. But she used to hang the sheets all the way around the tree on the branches, and it was just this big, like, airy tree fort. And I'd play house out there. And so I remember one day playing house out there. I'm pretty sure it was me and Spencer. And I'm guessing you were maybe in the playpen, because I don't really remember you.
Yeah,
sure you were
jogging
safe.
my memory.
Sure you were safe. And Grandma comes walking out with a little handsaw and goes out to one of the ditch trees that was growing out of the ditch and starts just slowly with the handsaw cutting, and we keep playing, and all of a sudden I just hear somebody yell, "Timber!" And I look out and I see Grandma and the tree fall over into the ditch. So I went running over there because I thought my poor grandma was hurt, and she was laying at the bottom of the ditch just laughing hysterically.
I'd say the earliest things I can remember, I was about 4 years old. We were living in the house at Stratford. The things I remember were Mom's hugs and kisses for boo-boos, and always saying our bedtime prayers, sitting at the foot of the bed and saying our bedtime prayers.
Of that she has a garden, and that she's my active pen pal, and that and
you can keep talking.
And that well, and I really like making cookies with her.
It's really hard because I have a ton of like great memories of Grandma. I remember her making me tea when I was just sick all through my 6th grade year. I remember you know, playing toys in her attic and all that sort of stuff and running around. But I think that really my best memories of Grandma have been, my best times with Grandma have been recently when we've gotten to sit down and talk, and I've gotten to really learn from her and hear about her experiences and get to share and stuff. It's just, it's so great to get to be able to learn from her in a real sort of like authentic way.
Hi, Grandma. So I'm wanting to wish you a very, very, very happy 90th birthday. We are all so blessed to have you with us for all these years, guiding us, showing us what it means to love, showing us what it means to care, setting an example in our faith. And I just want to let you know that today, on your birthday, and always, we love you, and we are so blessed by you.
We love you, Grandma.
Love you, Grandma.
You're
Happy
amazing.
birthday!
Mwah.
Love you, Grandma. Happy birthday. And I just hope I can be a quarter of the woman you've been. Love you.
Happy birthday, Mom. It brings me great joy to be here today celebrating with you. And I am just so privileged and honored to be your daughter. And I am especially proud of the number of people that come up to me and say, randomly in the grocery store, "Oh, you must be Verda's daughter."
Happy birthday! Cha-cha! Happy birthday, Grandma Verda!
That's distracting. Madeline, you are so distracting.
See, you want to be
The
complimentary
traits-
like
the-
great grandma.
The trait.
It wasn't on there, was it? You want me to?
What is the funniest thing you've ever saw great grandma do?
You gotta prepare me. Just take it out for a second.
Please state your name and your date of birth.
I don't know. I hope you're sure stopping the film.
Well, I think the thing that sticks out in my mind most is when
Mashed potatoes! Okay, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Gracie. I'm Evan. I'm Ben.
Ben, what?
I'm Bailey. And I've known Grandma for...
Are you really
No.
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 Okay.
20.
Don't think we need to introduce ourselves.
26 years of her 90s.
Is this recording?
Yeah.
Oh,
good.
Good.
What are some of your favorite?
Relax, we're not professionals. And her perseverance. How
Perseverance.
her perseverance.
Perseverance.
Perseverance. Her
I haven't decided yet. Take it off. You can't betray her happy. No. I don't know.
This is entrapment.
Hi, I'm Madison Winters, and I am great grandchild number 2.
Did you hit record again?
Yeah.
Accordion.
Grandma, how did you raise 5 kids and all 5 survived? Because I have a teenage daughter that you can have for free. She keeps messing with my train of thought, and this is why I should not have done this with Madeline around. I just drove 6 hours. I had this all worked out.
And then along comes Madeline.
It's legitimate.
Details. The Care Bear's got the Care Bear heart. The feet have the heart. And it was a rainbow, I like to believe, because I was a ray of a rainbow to Grandma.
It's a ray of sunshine.
Puppy wants to be in the video.
So yeah, same difference. Okay, right? Hardworking is
The rose actually
was because Grandma's hardworking. But you know, I'd like to say that Walker thought I was, you know, a humble servant.
I really thought she got all
I
the
did.
time. I had to tell her today that no, it wasn't just you.
Please list some of the things that Grandma has made for you over the years, and which is your favorite and why?
Devin, we already covered that. That was all the animals around me when we started. Sorry you weren't paying attention. Next.
Hi, Anna.